Mitzvosecha from the Temimei. I believe the theory goes that he wrote this when he was 12 years old. So he was ahead of the curve a little bit.
Doesn't mean it's easy.
It's far from easy. Yeah. So in any case, really I was a little bit troubled to figure out what to learn with you guys today. Firstly, because there's a very, very big mitzvah upon us from our Rabbeim. It really comes back from the Midrash and really from Yecheskel already that there's such a mitzvah. But it was, like many things in Chassidus, it was brought out and sort of revived and made into a practical household reality that one is intended to learn the laws of the Beis HaMikdash during the 3 weeks, which starts tonight. The first sikha I was going to learn with you guys was a whole long explanation as to why when you learn when you learn the laws of building the Beis HaMikdash, it's literally as though you're building it, and not only as though. The Rabbi explains at great length to the extent, in other words, he's trying to essentially get all the Jewish people to hop onto a new minhag, which really, even though it's an ancient concept, as I said, he revived it. So, of course, in the Rebbe's holy way, he's going to explain to us in the deepest possible way the significance of it. So I was going to learn a whole sikha with you about that, but I realized it was going to take us a whole 3 weeks just to get through this sikha, and I really want to just tell you the point, which is that when you learn the laws of the Beis HaMikdash, you're mamish building it. That's how you're makayim the mitzvah of va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'sochem. There's a positive mitzvah from the Torah to build the temple. When there's no available to grab bricks and stones, you are able to literally fulfill this mitzvah and build the temple by learning about it in the... What's that?
Where do we learn about it?
Where do we learn about this idea?
No, where do we learn about building the Beis HaMikdash?
So I'm saying, first of all, there's a whole sefer called Yecheskel where he explains the building of the third Beis HaMikdash. But then we're talking about, you can learn about the laws of the Mishkan that Moshe built, and essentially the Rambam is sort of the Mishnah of Midos, where it describes the measurements of the building, but also it's as it brought down in Halacha, in the Rambam, in what's called Hilchos Beis HaBechira, which is in the Sefer Avoda, which we happen to be in the middle of in the one chapter a day right now. So actually, those who were following the one chapter a day, we literally just learned the whole Hilchos Beis HaBechira about a week ago, if you recall. But the idea is you're supposed to learn them specifically with a special intent in the 3 weeks. Why? Even though a whole year you can fulfill this mitzvah by learning about these laws, in the 3 weeks, when it's the time that we're remembering the destruction, it's also the most opportune time to actually build the temple, right? To sort of deflect and create a scenario which is opposite of the destruction. And therefore, my second idea was to sit and learn the laws of Hilchos Beis HaBechira with you during this half an hour, which I'm still sort of on the fence about, but I'm assuming that you're going to do it on your own, right? Everyone during the 3 weeks is going to take it upon themselves, say I, to finish the Hilchos Beis HaBechira in the Rambam at least, right? And this will, bli neder, this will enable us to construct it. If I see within the next week or so that people are not jumping on the bandwagon, maybe we'll bring it into class and we'll do it here. In the meantime, however, since we have had a beautiful tradition of learning Chassidus during this hour, I thought it would be good if we learned the mystical dimension of building the Beis HaMikdash. And there actually is this sefer called Darech Mitzvosecha, is the Tzemach Tzedek's book, which has many, many mitzvahs in it, not all the mitzvahs, but a large variety of mitzvahs, where he brings the mitzvah, he brings down the Rambam as he's going to do here as well, and then he explains it in its mystical dimension. So what does it mean to build the temple spiritually? I think we can also get away with being Yotzi, the idea of that we're also building the temple. We're going to build it al pi Chassidus, right? So that's what we're going to do. So please, everyone will turn your book, if you have a book, to page Pei Hey, which is called Mitzvahs Binyan Mikdash. This is the official mitzvah that we have, one of the 613 mitzvahs, to actually build a temple. So let's see what it entails. Right now we're going to literally read the Rambam. He quotes it in the beginning here. You don't have a copy? There should be enough either books or copies to go around. Here, you don't need both, right? So here, these guys need one. Okay. And page Pei Hey, or page 169. That's all right. So this is a quote from the Rambam, Mitzvah 95 of the 248 positive mitzvahs. This is mitzvah 95. And the mitzvah is livnot mikdash. You have a mitzvah to build a temple. Shenemar, where do we see the verse which teaches us that we have to build a temple? V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. There's a verse that says, make me a temple and I will dwell within them. Right? Obviously it's noted in many places. It doesn't say I'll dwell within it. Rather, I'll dwell within them, which has its own beautiful connotation that the mitzvah of building a temple is also that we are the temple. Make me a mikdash out of yourself. And that's what means I'll dwell within them. However, right now we're talking just literally, how do you make a temple? These are the primary criteria of building the temple. 1. Osimbo kodesh v'kodesh HaKodashim. The first thing you have to do is build what's called a kodesh and a kodesh gadashim. What is a kodesh?
The holy.
What's the holy?
The outer courtyard.
Not the outer courtyard, but the sanctuary. If you see ever, I'm sure you've seen the picture of the Beis HaMikdash. Basically, it has, the building part has two primary parts. One is where the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's called the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant is. And then right outside there, you have another room called the Holy. And in that room, you're going to have the menorah and the golden altar and the table for bread. Right? Those three kelim are inside of that room. And that's called the Kodesh. So the first thing you have to do, if you don't have a Kodesh and a Kodesh Kodashim, you don't have a Mikdash. Right? These are the first two ingredients. Vayilifnei hakodesh makom acher, and now you have to have one more place in front of the kodesh, which hu nikra ulam. It's called the ulam. It's like a little antechamber, right, where you come in to this room before you get into the kodesh, right? And in that room, there's basically a big giant door. That's the big door that you generally see when you see the gate of the Beis HaMikdash. In that room, there's just two little tables in there. It's like a waiting room, but you're already in this building now, which shlashtem nikra heichel. The three of these rooms together are called the heichel, the chamber. So you have the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Kodesh, and the Ulam. Those three together are called the heichal, the chamber. If this is interesting to you, then we'll go switch back to the Rambam and we could just talk about the building and the dimensions for weeks. And I hope it is interesting, but we jumped into the Chassidus, so we're stuck with it. Osim mechitza chad saviv laheichel. Now what? You build one wall around the heichel, right? Rechok mimenu ke'ein kalei achatzer, which is equally distant in a way that the curtains of the courtyard in the time of Moshe, in the Mishkan, were distant from the Mishkan itself, right? So if you look in the Mishkan, they made curtains around the Mishkan. In doing so, they created an outer courtyard, right? And in the temple, which is based on the depiction of the Mishkan in the Torah, you also have to make a wall around the Heichel that you just built, which is likened to the curtains that are around the Mishkan, right? Shayu b'midbar, that was in the desert, but kol hamukaf u'mechitzazo, all the area that's contained inside of this wall, hu ke'ein chatzer oel moed, that is like what they had in the desert, called the courtyard of the tent of meeting. And hu azara, that place is called the azara. So that would be, for example, where you're going to have the altar, where you bring up animals inside of there, and there was also a hand washing station. Right? And so this was inside of what was the curtained area, and in the Mikdash, inside of this wall. And that area called the courtyard is called the Azara. Va'kol nikra Mikdash. And there you have what's called Mikdash. So you have your Heichel, you have your courtyard, and the wall around it. Now you've got what's called the temple, the Mikdash. Va'osim b'Mikdash ha'kelim. This is continuing the Rambam here, he's quoting. In this temple you make the vessels, Hakasuv Torah, which are written in the Torah. What are they? The Aron, which goes in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The menorah, the Shulchan, and the Mizbeach HaPnimi. As we already said, the menorah and the table and the inner altar, which is the golden altar, which goes where? In the Kodesh. And the Mizbeach HaChitzon, the outer altar, which goes where? The Azara, right? The courtyard. Does everyone have this pictured in their mind, more or less? Should we draw it?
Well, you said that was that like also?
Mizbeach Pnimi is, we said is in the Kodesh area. One more time, you have the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and its Kli is what? The Aron. Then right adjoined to that room, you have the Kodesh, a little bit bigger. It has 3 Kelim. What are they? Menorah, Shulchan, and the inner altar. And then you have the Ulam. Nothing really in there to speak of right now. There's a couple tables in there we're going to get to. And then you have outside of there called a big courtyard surrounded by a wall. In that courtyard is what vessel? The Mizbeach HaChitzon, right? Which is the offering altar where we offer the animals on it. Okay, finished. That's the halacha, the beginning of the Hilchos Beis Bechira from the Rambam.
What is it from the inner altar?
Ketoris.
Was it burning at all times?
Hmm?
Was Kataris burning at all times?
Was it burning at all times? No. No, not really. There was a time, in the morning and in the night, when they did the lamps, they would also bring the Ketoris. The Eish Tamid more goes on the altar outside. Okay, so now let's take a look Chassidically at this whole matter. What is going on with the mikdash and the kelim? What do they represent? Since the main intention of making a mikdash is in order for God to dwell amongst the Jewish people. Mind you, there's a machloikis between the Ramban and the Rambam on this. What is the purpose of the mikdash? And even though he just quoted the Rambam, when he tells the reason why there's a mikdash, he actually doesn't quote the Rambam's reason. What's the Rambam's reason for having a mikdash? Why does Rambam say we need a mikdash?
It's not the pasuk.
There's a pasuk that says we need a mikdash, but why do we need one? So we can offer animal sacrifices and celebrate our holidays. That's what Rambam says. He's more of a practical guy, right? His Kabbalah was hidden. He didn't say it openly. But the Ramban was more of an open Kabbalist. And he says, and Chassidus generally paskins like him on these inyanim. And Chassidus says, like the Ramban, why do we have a mikdash? Animals are nice, but because it's the place where God reveals himself to this world. Right? Gilei Elokus b'Yisrael. That Hashem should reveal himself amongst the Jewish people. And he brings a pasuk, v'shachanti b'socham, right? I will dwell within you, literally means Hashem is going to be revealing himself and dwelling. The word shachanti comes from what word for God? Shechina. Right? So it's basically, that's where the Shekhinah will be revealed. So therefore we were commanded to make this building kedugmas seder ishtalshlus. It's supposed to be an example of the seder ishtalshlus. In other words, it is the kli which basically brings God's revelation here. What is God's revelation? It's the Seder Ishtalshlus, it's godliness, right? Which is the orderly descent of the worlds and how the worlds come into being. So we're supposed to build this building so that it models physically all the spiritual dimensions and facets of what's going on above. The whole order of creation as it was drawn from the essence of the infinite light, blessed be He. Ki mavur b'Mishnas Chasidim Darech Brias Ha'olam, because in a sefer called Mishnas Chasidim, it is explained there the whole nature of creation. Ketzad, and this is essentially, some of his quote right out of the Arizal. Or ein sov tzimtzem oro upana makom shava mikol tzadav. So he explains over there, what does it mean? How Hashem created the ishtalshlus from the essence of God, that He contracted His infinite light, right? And He moved away and cleared out, I should say, a space which was equal on all sides. In other words, a circle. That's what it means, a space which is equal on all sides. V'hu makam agol, and it's a circular emptiness that Hashem made in His Orein Sof. Umashach besocho kav or dak, and then He drew inside of this empty space a thin line of light, ubederech yuridaso, and as this line of light is coming into the center of this circle, right? Because he's basically drawing it from the outside, one line of light into it, and as I'm sure you've seen some of these diagrams, it stops right in the center. It doesn't go to the bottom of the circle. It goes just to the, what do you call the middle of the circle? The point in the middle? I'm sure that has a name, right? The center of the circle. Ubederech yuridaso, as it's coming down, heir b'chalahahu, igul acher, right? It shines into this whole space another circle of light, Shel or, rachok me'at me'or ein sof, a little bit further away from the or ein sof. Uvridaso od, and as it goes down further, heir eagle sheni, and then it goes, the line goes a little bit down, and it shines another light, which is a full-blown spherical circle. Ad asara igulim, until it does that 10 times, shem kachab, which is called keser, chochma, bina, etc. Now, does anyone understand what we just said? Only you, because you're learning the Eitz Chaim right now. But basically, what we're just describing is like this. Hashem creates this empty spherical space, which is going to be the space of all the worlds. And then what does he do? He starts to take this little tiny line of light, which we've discussed in our previous class. This is like the drop of water which was previously in his infinite ocean. This is now going to emerge into this empty space. But because it's coming from the top, right? It's coming from the outside. Its first emergence is basically right touching the sphere, right? So it like peeks in, and as soon as it peeks in, what does it do? What does it do? It basically it's like a line that's coming down, right? Think of it like a pencil that you stick it into an onion, right? The first little tip of the pencil, right? But the onion's an empty space. It's not the greatest analogy. What happens when the little tip of the beginning of this line starts to come into the space? Yeah?
It opens up the
It fills the entire space with infinite light. Again, right? It's just that it's an infinite light, which is like sort of tailor-made to be in this space. It's obviously a much more finite light than the infinite light which negated this space to begin with. But when it comes in, it basically shines. It's like bringing a candle into a dark room, right? You shine that light, and it fills the whole world with this circle sphere of new light. But then what happens? He says the pencil, the line goes down a little bit further, and it creates another orb of a circular light, like concentric circles inside of that one. And then it does that 10 times. So you basically have like one dimension of spherical light inside another one, all the way down till you get to the center, which is called the 10 spheros of igulim. They're 10 circular level spheres, one smaller than the other, inside of this place, until you get to the center. This is like what happens when the line first comes down. Now, let me explain something. What's the idea of a circular light? Why do we say some light is circle and some light is straight? Right? We call it sometimes the or yashar, right? Like the straight light versus the igulim, these circular lights. Has anyone come across this?
Circular lights surround the cleaves and then the cow goes in them.
What does it mean? Okay, so what does it mean to surround the kli? Soviv v'mamale.
doesn't touch it.
Right? Soviv v'mamale. What does it mean soviv v'mamale? There's certain light, like you say, it's incapable of being perceived by any kli. Right? And that's why we call it a circle, because like a circle, it has no beginning and no end. You can't like point like a line. You can say here's where it starts, here's where it ends. It has like a direction, and the beginning is different than the end. And there's levels and so forth. You can break it up into different levels. A circle, you can't tell where's the beginning and the end. And this is the idea that this is a light which goes on forever. It doesn't have a beginning, and therefore it doesn't have an end, because it's infinite. So what's the concept, therefore, of making one circular light and then another circular light and then another circular light, one smaller than the next? He names them Keser, Chochma, Bina, that these lights basically of circular nature come down, and there's 10 different styles of them. What is the meaning of 10 different styles of circular light? If you want to tell me there's 10 different styles of Temimei light, that makes perfect sense to me, because each light is tailor-made for a different kli. And each light is different than the one that's below it, right? Because they're not infinite lights. So Chochmah is going to be different than Bina, is going to be different than Chesed and Gevurah, etc. But if you're talking to me now about the circular light, which the whole idea of a circular light is doesn't fit into any kelim, it's basically infinite. So what are you telling me? You have Chochmah, Bina, Das, all the spheros of the circular light. Anyone have an idea what's going on there? You understand the question. Let's put it like that. Does the question make sense? Circular light similarly is not broken up into parts. Sovev is by definition non-divisible. It's only or mamale, which goes into a vessel, and therefore one vessel is different than the other, that it can be broken down into parts and therefore levels. The whole idea of a circular light is it doesn't have levels, doesn't have parts, you can't break it down. So what's 10 spheres of circular light doing?
The cob itself, makes different levels within the circle that it's going into. Each level which is generated within that circle makes that circle have a certain identity, so to speak, of that particular sphere. So now that particular circle has the yashar, the straight line, which is like that, felt identity, I guess. And then there's also its influence on everything around it, which is the circle.
But they're the same. All the circles are the same.
I know, but each one's a little smaller, which means as the kav goes down, the lower parts of the kav go into each smaller circle. So each smaller circle basically has a lower part of the straight line within it.
Okay, like the pencil and the onion. Okay, very good. I'm just trying to get you on the same page because he's trying to explain.
Is that right?
Yes, but nonetheless, all the circular lights are the same, right? We are stuck with this question: why would you have different names for different circular lights since it's all the same? He's going to now address that, right? But first, we have to understand the question. So the idea is that, fine. Let's get now to, where do we leave off? If you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the Aleph, the very last word on the line, Ba'achareihem. Right? After these circular lights are coming out, after them follows Boim Yud Spheres de Yosha. You now have what's called 10 spheros of the straight light. Chule ad kan diburo. That's the end of the Mishnah's Chassidim. This is all we're left with in terms of now the Tzemach Tzemach has to explain it to us. But basically, what's happening now is, let's say you have that onion with all these different levels, and the pencil's coming through it, right? So the pencil that's coming through it is a new set of light, but this light follows the same line down. It goes from Keser to Chochma to Bina, etc., all the way until it gets to Malkus. But the difference is what? This is called the Or Yashar, or Yosher, which means that this is the Or Mamale. This light is delineated and different from the top to the bottom. And this is like basically the light that we usually call Adam, right? This light that's coming in, just like an Adam, his head, right, which is where it's closest to the circle, has higher powers of perception than his feet, which would be the bottom of the circle. So the line that goes down, it gets sort of smaller and smaller, like V-shaped. As it's going lower and lower and lower, it's getting less and less light. And this is all happening superimposed upon these circles. Right? So there's these circular lights, and then there's this line coming through them. The line coming through them has a difference in perception between each and every stage, whereas the circles that it's going through, seemingly all that light is equal at every stage. All the circles are equal at every stage.
Each one's smaller.
They're smaller, but the light inside of a circle is infinite light. But the idea is that basically when let's say the straight light that comes down, when it hits Chochmah, inside that Or Yosher, the straight light, there's a revelation, so to speak, inside of a Kli, that there's the intelligence has just sort of been born. But this is happening superimposed upon that circle where it's the circle of Chochmah, which means there's a Makif level called Chochmah, which this is interacting with as it goes through that place.
So is the line changing because of the circle, or is the line already changed?
The line changes not because of the circle. The line changes intrinsically because it has a beginning and an end. It's not circular light. It's a straight line.
So it's
And a
coming-
straight line where
further
it's
from the
closer to the source, it has more light. When it's further from the source, it has less light. Just like a man, in its top, there's more sort of godly revelation in your intellect and your emotions. When you go down to your feet, you get to the malach hamaves of the body, the heel, and is the least amount of life. So this straight line, we call that the man, right? Because he's basically taking the godly light and filtering it level after level. But what we're saying is that it's sort of superimposed upon these circles that are all around it, which seemingly none of those sections of the man can experience the circular light which is surrounding them because it's makif. The definition of that light is that it's circular and it doesn't get perceived by the vessels.
I'm not sure. What's the subject matter? I'm sorry.
We're talking about broccoli and cauliflower.
I got lost in the extension.
Fair enough. What we're talking about right now is that the mikdash is made in the pattern and the organization of the Seder Ishtalshlus. So in order to understand how the Mikdash is built and what it's referring to, we have to go and look up and see what it's trying to emulate above. So I'll give you a clue real quick. The idea that there's rooms and vessels is an attempt to physically portray this notion of the circular light and the straight light. In other words, the Mikdash itself is in all its detail, right? You're going to find in the Mikdash there's unbelievable attention to detail, the size of everything, the space between the walls, the measure of every single thing. All those measurements are not just willy-nilly measurements. They're basically physical measurements of some kind of like an infinitely supernal concept, both measuring the makif light, the sovev light, and the panimi light. And that's the difference between, we're going to see like the walls of the mikdash versus the vessels of the mikdash. I'm trying to make everybody understand, obviously with not much success, but what is the difference between makif and panimi above, so we can understand what role the building and the vessels play below. You following so far? Okay, we're going to try and do it. We're going to have to wait till next time. Okay, shkoyach.